Hi there and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa on this Wednesday. Tonight, why Steven Guilbeault quit cabinet.
If you're a member of a cabinet and you disagree with a decision or a policy from your government, then the obvious thing to do is to quit cabinet.
Mr. Guilbeault joins us live in studio in moments on why he left the Prime Minister's cabinet over the federal government's pipeline deal with Alberta and why he still wants to remain in caucus. Then, the Fed's new Algoma layoffs would come.
That loan, that support gives Algoma a bridge to the future.
He didn't give the workers a bridge to the future. He gave them a bridge to the unemployment lines.
Fallout after Algoma Steel's CEO tells us the federal and Ontario governments gave the company $500 million, knowing a third of the company's workforce in Sault Ste. Marie would inevitably be cut. The MP for Sault Ste. Marie, Terry Sheehan, will be here coming up. Then we'll bring in our front bench on the political price of Guilbeault's cabinet exit and how the feds and Ontario can sell Canadians on lending $500 million to a company cutting staff. Sharon Carr, Kevin Deagle, Jamie Ellerton, and Sebastian Skamsky are coming up a little bit later on. First, though,
I sincerely doubt that the new pipeline will ever get built. We still have carbon pricing, and we will continue having an industrial carbon pricing, but I disagree with some of the fundamental elements in this memorandum of understanding. I think we are putting a lot on the table and getting nothing in return.
That's Steven Guilbeault ahead of his first Liberal caucus meeting since quitting cabinet over last week's federal energy agreement with Alberta, a deal that would see the feds waive clean energy regulations in exchange for the province negotiating an increased industrial carbon price, all in pursuit of a new bitumen pipeline to the Pacific. Something Mr. Guilbeault said he couldn't back, calling the agreement a, quote, serious mistake. But he has decided to stay in the Liberal caucus, and Mr. Guilbeault is with us live in studio right now. Hi there. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
My pleasure, Vashi.
Have you had any regrets since your decision?
No, I've not.
Why not?
It's a tough decision. I mean, as a cabinet minister, you have a responsibility to tell your prime minister what you feel is the right thing or the wrong thing to do. And if you disagree with a policy or a decision by the government in our parliamentary system, then as a cabinet minister, your only recourse is to leave. And this is what I did.
So I had read a story, and maybe it was wrong, but it seemed, well placed the night before you quit, essentially saying, a source close to you was saying that you were going to remain in cabinet because you felt you could have more influence, essentially, over the direction of climate policy or what was to come than outside of cabinet. Less than 24 hours later, you quit. What changed in that period?
I mean, from the first moment I saw a draft of the agreement, the memorandum of understanding between the federal government and Alberta, I voiced my strong opposition, and I told people, I told those people who were with me that I understood that me opposing this would have some consequences, i.e., me leaving cabinet. And from that day on, Tuesday, Wednesday, tried to work like, are there changes that could be made to the agreement? But by then it was pretty baked in, and the changes that were made were largely cosmetic and didn't change the nature of the agreement. Like I felt, and I feel, we left a lot on the table for not getting a lot in return. This idea that we had that we have to abandon our clean electricity regulation that will help us clean up our electricity grid across the country for decades to come in exchange for Alberta putting a better price on pollution. They already have to do that because of the federal pricing system. So we're not getting anything in return. Alberta's not giving Canadians a better deal out of that. I have supported the Pathways project to capture carbon and store it in the ground for many years, but people have to understand that it's not a magic bullet. It will help reduce pollution from the oil sands sector by about 12%. It's not 50%, certainly not 100%. It's 12%. And 12% is not nothing, but it will still make oil sands oil one of the most carbon intensive in the world. Like right now, it's about 10 times more pollution intensive than oil that's produced in Newfoundland, for example. So it's going to be slightly better, but it'll be nowhere near what's produced even in other parts of Canada, let alone the North Sea or elsewhere in the world.
The grand bargain and all that you just said, we put to your colleagues, including the person who succeeded you in this position in the days in the wake of your exit, on multiple occasions in great detail, like how the thesis that they seem to be putting forward is the increase, whatever we're able to negotiate in the form of an increase to the industrial price on carbon, will mitigate the impact of the rollback of these other policies. Is that possible?
I mean, not with the current agreement. To mitigate the losses of measures we're willing to leave on the table in order to get this agreement with Alberta, the price on pollution would have to be almost 3 times as high as what is currently being proposed. So there's an Environment Canada estimates that to get to the same result in terms of reduction of pollution just using industrial carbon pricing and taking clean electricity regulation out of the equation, you'd have to have a price on pollution of about $400 a ton. And we're talking right now about $130 a ton. So, I mean, the math doesn't add up. And frankly, I think that my government needs to be honest with Canadians. With the rollbacks that we've seen over the past few months on different climate change measures that have been adopted over the years by me and some of my predecessors, it is impossible to see how we achieve our 2030 targets. And we knew it was going to be difficult. When I was minister, you and I have had this conversation. We knew it was going to be challenging. It's impossible now. And I think we need to come clean. We need to tell Canadians, it won't work. We won't get there. And the Prime Minister, he's the Prime Minister. If he wants another strategy, he wants another approach, he can do that. But we also have to tell Canadians what's the new plan and what does that plan lead us to. And right now, even achieving net zero, so carbon neutrality by 2050, it is very hard for me to see how we get there with what has been announced so far.
So you think even that target is in jeopardy now?
Yes. Yes.
Did you convey this at any point to the Prime Minister? Like, was there, not to say that you would disclose all the details, but like, has there been a frank conversation about this between you and the Prime Minister specifically?
Last week, I've had a couple of conversations with the Prime Minister, and they were very honest and frank and respectful. Where I told them many of the things that I'm telling you now, and where eventually I told them that I was no longer the person to be able to help him continue support his agenda on this issue. Now, why stay in caucus? Why stay?
You beat me to the punch, right? Because, and I'll frame the question if you don't mind, because I think a lot of Canadians watching would ask that question. If you don't feel like you can defend, on principle, essentially, you have to resign from cabinet because of the agenda that they're pursuing. How can you stay in the government? Period.
Well, I have a profound disagreement with the Prime Minister on how he and his team want to continue moving forward on climate change. And as I said, I don't see the plan. I don't see the math right now. And maybe they can prove me wrong in the coming months. That being said, I still think that the best person to serve Canadians and to help us, to guide us through those difficult times we're going through is Mark Carney. Without Prime Minister Carney, we would not have had the historic investment in the arts and culture that was in the last budget. We certainly wouldn't have measures that continue to support Canadians like childcare, like dental care. The Conservative Party of Canada have said time and time again that they would get rid of those measures. These measures are helping people, like thousands of dollars back in the pockets of Canadians. So
why do something, pardon the interruption, why do something so politically damaging to the Prime Minister in removing yourself from cabinet? Why not stay around the table and fight for the things that you're describing tonight?
I mean, I've tried to do that with as much tact as I could. I didn't leave the room throwing grenades around and accusing people of this and that. I think I've been very respectful of the Prime Minister and the government, but I felt that I owed it to him, to my colleagues, and to my constituent to be true to myself. And to be able to look myself in the mirror. Like, I don't know, Vashi, how I would have been able to say with a straight face that this is an agreement that I can support. Now, I support the Prime Minister's intention of making sure that all Canadians feel they have a place in the Federation, but we played in that movie before. We bought a pipeline. We announced that before the 2019 election, and we lost all our seats in Alberta and Saskatchewan in the 2019 election.
But maybe because it wasn't about the seats, like, how is it okay to buy that pipeline but not build another one? Like, you stood by that prime minister then.
Actually, I never supported that pipeline.
You didn't, but you still stayed in cabinet.
No, I wasn't in cabinet when that decision was made. And when I ran in 2019, I specifically said that I disagreed with the pipeline, but I agreed with many of the other things that the prime minister of the time, Prime Minister Trudeau, was doing, specifically on climate change and nature. And as you know, politics is about compromise. In a country of 40 million people, you know you're not going to win all your battles, but at some point you have to draw a line in the sand and say this is a place where I can't go, and respectfully say that I have to leave cabinet.
Do you think that you can remain in you plan to remain? Like, do you plan to run in the next election, for example, under the Liberal banner? Like, do you or are you seriously considering your future outside of just cabinet because of this?
I plan to stay a member of the Liberal caucus and to continue play an active role on these issues that are important to me, certainly the environment, climate change, nature, culture as well. I was culture minister twice, 2019 to 21, and until recently I was climate and identity, culture and nature. I honestly, the dust is still settling since my decision of last week, but I'm definitely there for the coming months.
So you haven't decided beyond that?
Let's talk. Let's have another conversation.
I will definitely invite you. I just wanted to ask one final question, because as you were speaking, I was thinking, to be fair to the Prime Minister, he hasn't made a secret of his economic agenda, right? And he's been clear right through the election around the desire to make Canada an energy superpower, but inclusive in that conventional. I can think of the first interview I conducted with him after the swearing-in ceremony, in which I asked about some key environmental policies that Alberta had identified as irritants to development. He indicated even then that he was open to rolling them back because of his desire to see big projects and big things get done. Like, why now is this such a surprise in a way? What did he not disclose that prompted this drastic of a decision?
I certainly support the. I think that there's been mixed messages that have been sent over time. I certainly support the idea of making sure that Canada is an energy superpower. In my view and the view of many of my colleagues, this is a green superpower, like critical minerals, renewable energy, clean technologies, and there are many of these things that are part of the plan right now that I still support.
So is oil and gas.
But the this idea that, and I was even willing to entertain a conversation about a pipeline if done properly. One of the things that was difficult with the agreement was the fact that we had made an agreement with Elizabeth May from the Greens to support us in the budget by not including a specific subsidy to oil and gas, and it's explicitly stated in the budget that we wouldn't do that, and then we turn around 2 weeks later and we put it in this agreement with Alberta. That was I was one of the person who was asked to work with Ms. May. Did
you help convince her to support the budget?
I did. I wasn't the only one, but I did, and I felt that this was not a genuine gesture on our part. She supported us in good faith. I don't think she will support us moving forward. I think that bridge has been burned, and to me that was something that was difficult to accept. I think, yes.
But again, I guess I just wonder, he has made it explicit from the beginning that he wanted to see oil development. Sort of. Obviously his track record prior to is why Conservatives doubted those statements, but he has said it on numerous occasions. Why, when it was in black and white, did it surprise you in the end?
Well, actually, our platform talked about making Canada an energy superpower, but we weren't specific about projects and things we wanted to do. And I understood why the Prime Minister decided to get rid of the consumer carbon pricing. It was very controversial, politically controversial. I understood when we decided to pause the regulation for electric vehicles. The auto sector is going through a rough time right now, but it was the accumulation, abandoning the emissions on the cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector, even if we do pathways, so if we capture that carbon and we store it for oil sands, we'll be worse off from an emissions perspective, from a pollution perspective, if we add another 1 million barrels from a new pipeline, even with carbon capture and storage, than the current situation. We're worse off, according to a study by the Pembina Institute in Alberta. So it's the accumulation of these things that led me to this decision.
Okay, I will leave it on that note. Thanks for your time as always,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Guilbeault.
much.
I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Dasha.
That's Steven Guilbeault. We're going to talk about this and the political impact of it with our front bench a little later on. Sharon Carr, Kevin Deagle, Jamie Ellerton, and Sebastian Skamsky will be here. First, though, on the other end of a short break, we'll go one-on-one with the MP for Sault Ste. Marie to talk about those Algoma layoffs and what the CEO of the company told us last night. Back in a moment with that conversation.
What we did with the Ontario government was really to step up, do our part to make sure that we support the workers and support the industry as they're pivoting to their new method of producing steel.
Why give them money if you knew that they were going to cut jobs?
Well, what I'm saying is that if it was not for federal and provincial support, the situation at Algoma would be far different.
Well, I think the point is that the money is there to protect Algoma Steel into the future. Look, this is an industry that's particularly under attack as a result of a trade war that we're in the middle of.
Government ministers there are responding after Algoma Steel's CEO Michael Garcia told us they knew full well that the company would be cutting a third of its workforce before lending $400 million in tariff relief. Here's that clip from last night's Power Play.
Well, I think the government certainly knows our business strategy. It knows the pivot that we had to make. It knew very well that the extreme pressure the company was under. I don't think anybody would loan the company $500 million without asking very detailed questions about what our business plan was.
Terry Sheehan is the Liberal MP for Sault Ste. Marie Algoma. Hi, Mr. Sheehan. Pleasure to welcome you to studio. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you very much for having me.
The first question I have to ask based on the interview last night with the CEO is, were you and or your government aware that these layoffs were coming prior to securing that loan for Algoma?
Well, back in 2021, the Algoma Steel, well, I have to go back even further. So in 2015, Algoma Steel went into bankruptcy protection, and they had blamed cheap dump foreign steel on it. And so they went into a restructuring process. And so I was just newly elected, was called into the meeting, and began our work to strengthening our steel regime. So we did that, and as we were doing that and supporting the steel, Donald Trump put the first tariffs on there. And so we worked to support the steel industry, and we continued to do so. And fast forward, coming out of that in 2019-ish, 2020, they came together with a new plan for an electric arc furnace. So they applied to us and were successful applying to us and the province in getting that money. So during that process, they had talked about there would be less jobs needed. So that was supposed to be done during and through attrition. So that would be happening in like late 2027 or so. The different dates have been going around. But it was Sunday night when I got a phone call from a Liberal staffer informing me that there was going to be 1,000 layoffs. So I called Algoma Steel in the morning and spoke with Mr. Garcia and found out what was happening. So I was surprised that it was happening at that time. And so I called the union heads, we spoke. But I had done a lot of work prior to that in setting up and advocating for the steel industry, in particular Algoma Steel, to make many changes for supports because of the tariffs. And the 50% tariffs is really what drove them to push up what they had to do to pivot. So we had to support them because, as Algoma Steel has said, without our loan and the provincial loan, they wouldn't exist.
like I sort of get it in that, from what I can ascertain, your government didn't want to loan $400 million without, everything possible being done to make sure the company was viable. But part of the viability is cutting costs, accelerating the cutting of costs through these job cuts. And I think you've been a part of the debate, you've listened to the debate in the House. The question from the opposition to your government has been like, why, when you loan this money, did you not attach conditions that there not be job losses? But from what I could tell from what the CEO said, it was actually like, not that the layoffs were a condition of the loan, but that accelerating this transition, which includes those layoffs, is part of the reason they even got the loan. Is that fair?
Well, the way it was conveyed to me was that the loan was made to help them pivot to new lines, because basically they've been shut out of the American market since they exported 50% to 60%. And so basically their coil product was non-existent. Algoma Steel pays the tariff, the end consumer doesn't, so they were bleeding really bad. And they had said they were going to close, to us, that there was a potential of closure, and that they needed that money to pivot to new products such as I-beams, increasing their plate production, as well as looking at some other things that have been kicked around but not discussed, a rail division, which would tap into our major Build Canada Strong efforts in being our best consumer of steel and wood and aluminum. So that's what we funded that on. And so with the 50% tariff still on there, it accelerated, according to the executive of Ottawa Steel, accelerated their plans.
Do you feel, though, that your government, and this isn't directly aimed at you, but the government, the ministers who are speaking are being transparent with Canadians about what they knew and when? Like, I think that there is a sort of expectation among Canadians that if their money is being given to a company, that it not result in job losses.
Yeah, it is very, very difficult with the steel industry. I mean, at one time, Algoma Steel was 12,000 people, and it has been through different iterations. And, it's been through different restructuring 3 times, as recently as from 2015 to 2019 when I was first elected. And so, we continue to support the steel industry. It's a very, very important employer. And our total position now is to make sure that the 1,000 workers are looked after, that they get EI, seamless delivery, make sure that we do everything ahead of time so that we are, rapidly working over the next 4 months, but in the new year, getting everything ready to make sure that the folks on EI receive the benefits that they so deserve and need to support themselves, as well as training and upskilling, so that if and when they choose to go back to Algoma Steel, they can, and they will be able to, take advantage of those 500 jobs that the CEO had made when he spoke yesterday on your show.
That sounds a bit optimistic, and I say with great respect. Like he said, maybe those jobs might be available depending on how the business develops and what happens with these tariffs. Yep. But the 1,000 jobs that existed on Sunday will no longer exist. Like, he was unequivocal about it. I have to ask, again, with respect, like the Prime Minister today in the House of Commons, in response to a question from the Conservatives, said, wages are up, inflation is down, life is good. Like, how can your government be delivering that message at a time when 1,000 people before Christmas are staring down the barrel of no job in the new year?
It's extremely challenging with these 50% tariffs. No matter what your business is, no business can sustain a 50% tariff for a very long period of time. So we had to act. Mike and many people at the steel plant have said the alternative was closing, which would mean a loss of all those jobs. And it is very, very challenging time. So we're going to be there and continue to support the industry and the workers. We'll train and upskill them as they require to either work back at Algoma Steel, but perhaps somewhere else. But also highlight. Is
there somewhere else? And again, I ask with respect because I've spoken to the mayor. I've spoken to you know the community better than I do. The real worry is these are good paying jobs that the community does not have the ability to absorb. Yep,
and that is the challenge. So we have to redouble our efforts on diversifying our economy and attracting new businesses as well. And so I've conveyed that to the Prime Minister. I've conveyed that to cabinet ministers that, as we're going out and finding new partners to trade with and to deal with and to do business with, that keep Sault Ste. Marie at the forefront, because we do have, and we're a center of manufacturing excellence. So I know that, the people that live in Sault Ste. Marie could make anything. So that is part of what we have to do, and we have to redouble our effort. And I'm committed to doing that with the same passion that I've always done that, to support the workers, to support the steel industry, but we have to diversify our industry in Sault Ste. Marie.
The diversification efforts underway, best case scenario, are medium to long-term impact. I think those families tonight, and probably many others in the community, are worried about tomorrow, the next month, the month after that. What's your message to them tonight?
We'll be there. And that
what does that mean?
Well, we'll be there because we're going to make sure that we work together as a team. And that's one thing that Sault Ste. Marie is. We're very resilient. And when we are challenged, and we've been challenged again and again and again throughout history, we come together. All levels of government. Forget the politics, forget all the partisanship. It's all about working for those workers. So we're going to be there for them and their families, and make sure that the supports are there. We have made changes in recent months to make sure that EI is more responsive, that it's quicker, and that people can keep more of their money and get more money whilst they're on EI. Plus, we've also funded labour market agreements, and we'll work with the province of Ontario to make sure that those that wish to be trained, retrained, get a ticket, upskill, will have that opportunity so that they can continue to make a great wage for themselves and their family.
Okay, I've got to leave it on that note. I'm out of time. Thank you for your time, Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
So that's the federal government's response. How is it playing out politically? We're going to talk about that with our front bench after a short commercial break. Sharon Carr, Kevin Deagle, Jamie Ellerton, and Sebastian Skamsky. There they all are. They're back with me in just 2 minutes. Stay right there.
How is it the Prime Minister could have been so incompetent to saddle Canadians who can't afford to pay their bills with a $400 million bailout bill without any guarantee of jobs staying in Canada?
I quote the CEO of Algoma Steel that there would be an even darker day if this government hadn't acted. That loan, that support gives Algoma a bridge to the future.
As long as the CEO is happy with the $400 million gift he got from the Prime Minister, that's all that matters to these Liberals. He didn't give the workers a bridge to the future, he gave them a bridge to the unemployment lines.
May I quote a Conservative leader that's actually in office? The Premier of Ontario. We had a choice. Save 2/3 of the jobs or let the company go down. We chose the future.
A very feisty day of debate in the House of Commons as the opposition asks why the feds would loan $400 million to Algoma Steel, knowing the company was set to cut a third of its workforce. Ontario also gave the Sault Ste. Marie Company, which is Canada's last standing independent publicly owned steel producer, $100 million. The province echoes the Prime Minister, saying it was a choice between saving 2/3 of the company and losing it all. But is either government succeeding in selling that message? Let's bring in our front bench to talk about that. Kevin Deagle is a vice president at Crestview Strategy. He held senior roles in key portfolios in the Trudeau government, including at Natural Resources Canada. Sharon Carr, next to him, is a CTV News political analyst. She's former deputy chief of staff to former finance minister Bill Marneau. Jamie Ellerton is the principal at Kanaptis and worked for Minister Jason Kenney during the Harper government. And Sebastian Skamsky, here in studio with me, was former director of media relations to Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Nice to see you on this Wednesday. Sebastian, I'll start with you on this. I've said on the pro, I said to the MP, Mr. Sheehan previously, I understand why when you loan a company money, you want to figure out if it's viable and that, certain things would have to be in place, including this move to electrification that cost all these jobs. What I don't get is why nobody was honest about it, essentially, until the CEO said so.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really astounded, and we saw some of the clips from QP, which were really revealing. Prime Minister Carney basically said, once this was revealed, thanks to the reporting you guys did, that this is part of the future. I think Canadians need to recognize that part of Prime Minister Carney's vision for this country, unfortunately, involves mass layoffs across multiple industries. And this isn't the first time we've seen this happen. Stellantis was given tens of billions of dollars by the government. And we saw what happened weeks ago, some months ago now, where they said they would be shuttering production. lumber mills across in BC and Nova Scotia have been shutting down left, right, and center. Prime Minister Carney and his cabinet, unfortunately, won't tell you that this is what the result of their inaction is going to lead to. But we are seeing now, increasingly, that it's just leading to job losses. Prime Minister Carney ran an entire campaign predicated on the fact that only he could deliver the results for Canadians when it came to dealing with President Trump. And he set his own deadline to July 21st. It's December, and all we have seen are job losses.
I would have forgotten that if not for the Conservatives reminding me.
Right.
Kevin, I do think, though, to Sebastian's point, what these layoffs and the reaction to them and the constant questions over Stellantis and the other layoffs show us is, despite this overall strategy to wait Trump out, there are real impacts in the interim that are going to become major political challenges, I think, for all levels of government, anyone who's in power as well.
This is exactly right, Vashi. And I understand the Conservative instinct to lay all of this at the feet of Prime Minister Carney. But we need to remember that we are in a tariff war against an economy that is 13 times our size. They were our largest trading partner, and now they're tariffing us to the tune of 50% for steel. So steel's a great example. Algoma has been shut out from American markets, and the Canadian government is responding to this and helping them pivot away from coal blast furnaces to electric arc furnaces, which are more competitive, more sustainable, and so on. But they're helping them shift. That's not to say that we are not going to experience pain, and I don't think Canadians expect us that we won't feel pain. We will take hits. This is the U.S. They are our largest trading partner, and they are attacking us in a lot of ways. So we need to be expecting these. I think to date, Canadians have been pretty patient with Carney's approach to wait out taking a bad deal in favor of getting a good deal. But I think we'd be naive not to expect that we will feel this pain. And of course, my compassion, my heart does go out to those experiencing these layoffs. And the hope is that we don't experience further ones, but I think the likelihood is that that may come.
Yeah, and all of that makes sense. I think what's lacking, though, is just candor. Sharon, nobody in advance, again, of last night was like, hey, this is the decision we made because they had to make this pivot. We knew it would cost these jobs. Here's our plan for these jobs. Everything feels kind of ad hoc, which is surprising given that none of it was a surprise.
Yeah. So the biggest issue, I think, here is the communications and rollout of how all of this came out. If both the province and the feds are saying, listen, I know the Conservatives are going to call us out on this, but it was basically do we save the baby or do we throw it out with the bathwater? And I think the failure on even Algoma's part was kind of communicating what this is going to look like. So there's 1,000 jobs that are going to be lost. Is it temporarily lost? Are they going to be reskilled and brought back? What type of functions and programs are going to be put in place to support them in the meantime? Sault Ste. Marie is not a very big place where 1,000 jobs can be absorbed very quickly. So that message needed to be made clear. And I think that's where the fault should lie, is that they didn't roll it out as they could have. But again, we are facing a global trade war with our largest trading partner. And for us to be naive that there's not going to be some pain, I think it's not practical. And I would say that the government needs to use this as an example that if there are other industries that are going to be impacted, if there are people being directly impacted after funds are being given to the government, to the company, there needs to be a better rollout on how that looks, because it's just before Christmas and this is not something anyone wants to have to go through.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I totally understand what you're saying about a lack of clarity, but the CEO was clear. Those jobs are gone. Last night, he was unequivocal. Maybe there's some retooling, maybe 500 jobs over some period of years in the new operations, if those operations should succeed, which is a big if. But right now, the 1,000 people who are a part of the operation who work in the old way of doing things, as of March, it will be over. On the broader point, Jamie, of what it means for when we try to get back to the table, or how fiercely we do try to get back to the table. An interesting thing to keep our eye on is, of course, that the Prime Minister is headed back to Washington. He's going for the FIFA draw. So nothing official on the schedule about meeting with the U.S. president, but Trump is going to be there, too. I'm told there's a period of time backstage where they will both be there. What kind of scrutiny will the trip face, do you think?
I think there's going to be scrutiny because anytime the Prime Minister of Canada goes to meet and be in the same room with the President of the United States, genuinely, like a media circus follows and all the cameras are there overanalyzing and analyzing every single moment. And so I think that's definitely going to be part of what is going to come out of that. But I think when you look at the Prime Minister in question period today, I fundamentally just think he missed the mark. You're talking about 1,000 people who are about to hit the EI rolls 3 weeks before Christmas. And he's there essentially as a cheerleader for macroeconomic things that he likes and kind of totally lacked empathy. And I kind of really thought missed the moment and kind of showed himself to be quite out of touch with the frontline realities of what's going on in the trade war. And so the master negotiator who does really well in the boardrooms and in those kinds of settings, as a retail politician, I think you saw the limitations of where Mark Carney is right now. And so I think when you look at what is going on, and as it relates back to your question on the trade deal, actions, I think, speak louder than words. Sebastian's already pointed out he missed a self-imposed deadline of July. And I think it's increasingly clear that the Prime Minister would rather punt on making a deal than to rush a deal to say he has one and have it be a bad one that's going to have longer-term consequences. And I think where he's really kind of failed in this part of this first 9 months of his prime ministership is to actually lay out a coherent vision as to what we're working towards, acknowledge some of the trade-offs, and kind of play for a rallying cry to bring people on board as to what we're working towards. Right now, on so much of the big files of the day, he's trying to play both sides and kind of buy himself some time. And I think there's real risk that that's going to catch up with him.
Okay, well, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to another story of political risk, and that is Steven Guilbeault quitting cabinet. We spoke with Mr. Guilbeault a little bit earlier on the show. After a quick commercial break, the front bench will be back to unpack what he said. We're back.
I think that my government needs to be honest with Canadians, with the rollbacks that we've seen over the past few months on different climate change measures that have been adopted over the years by me and some of my predecessors. It is impossible to see how we achieve our 2030 targets. One of the things that was difficult with the agreement was the fact that we had made an agreement with Elizabeth May from the Greens to support us in the budget by not including a specific subsidy to oil and gas. This was not a genuine gesture on our part. She supported us in good faith. I don't think she will support us moving forward. I think that bridge has been burned.
Steven Guilbeault, earlier on this show, in his first English-language television interview since quitting cabinet, the former minister and longtime environmentalist called the Prime Minister's energy deal with Alberta a serious mistake and gave up his cabinet post. But as you heard from him earlier, he will remain, at least for the next few months, as a Liberal MP. How might his resignation impact the Prime Minister and the political climate overall? Let's bring back our front bench, Sharon Carr, Kevin Deagle, Jamie Ellerton, and Sebastian Skamsky. Sharon, I'll start with you on this one. He was very frank, I thought pretty forthcoming. Do you think that this has done political damage? And do you, in particular, like his contention that, Canada's not going to meet its targets, like what faction of Liberals does that matter for politically?
Listen, I think in every decision that is made in politics, there's always pros and cons, and you're always going to get someone who's upset about it. Now, Steven Guilbeault is not someone who has hidden his personal beliefs around climate change. I think everyone knew when he came into government, when he ran, what his thoughts were. And you know what? There might be other ministers, other MPs who have similar views. But I think what's really important is that we have to meet our moment right now. We're not in the same position that we were before. Climate change is always going to be something that we have to care about. We know that the Prime Minister cares deeply about it. He's written about it extensively. But we're also dealing with a global trade war. We were dealing with national unity issues, and we finally have gotten to a point where Alberta and Ottawa is working together in a way that we can try to be more independent as an economy. So you have to weigh the pros and cons, and I know that he's frustrated and upset about how Elizabeth May was utilized in all of this, but quite frankly, I think you have to look at the greater good, and I don't agree with a lot of what he has said. I think that things can change and targets can be adjusted, but he's a principled person. But sometimes you have to care about more than your one cause and think about the entire country.
I think all of that is true. I think a lot of Canadians can accept that argument, Jamie. What stood out to me, though, is his ask of his own government to be honest, right? Like the idea that you can make that argument, but then you have to concede that all of the things can't be true at the same time. And you have to say, I'm not going to meet those targets. We aren't going to be able to. The thing I'm telling you will make up for the other things I'm bringing back. Like, it's not true. You cannot kind of win over everything all the time. So far, they're not taking heed of that.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see here is kind of twofold. One, on the kind of macro political lens, I don't think there's going to be much of an immediate consequence for the Prime Minister, because I do think Canadians are not as focused on climate change as they were in the past, given the existential challenges our economy is going through, building off of what we just talked about in the last segment. But where I do think this does become a political problem for the Prime Minister is it is going to have some disloyalty in Liberal ranks. And let's be honest, political activists, people who make it their purpose in life and their mission and devote a disproportionate number of hours in their day to fighting for causes as activists, tend to have an outsized role in shaping the impact of how political parties operate. And that internal fissure is going to be something that I think continues to grow if the Prime Minister is not able to get a handle on it. And so while he may win the day on the macro political argument in terms of how Canadians writ large are going to talk about this, make no mistake, this is going to cause division within Liberal ranks. And when those divisions open up, they're often hard to close.
Do you think, Kevin, that that's why they're not kind of, doing what every journalist hopes and being like, hey, we're not going to meet the targets, guys. It's over. Let's be honest. Do you think that part of why they have to keep talking about at least trying to meet them or attempting to is because there is a faction of the party who would feel as upset as Guilbeault or somewhere close to it if they abandoned that?
Yeah, let me start with a very reluctant agreement with Jamie. I think my fellow panelists know how much I hate
very
doing
reluctant. Don't oversell it, Kevin.
But the fact of the matter is that climate
dragged right there, yeah.
Climate's been falling down the list in terms of what Canadians care about. Top three right now: cost of living, economy, healthcare. And I care a lot about climate, but Canadians, when faced with all these other issues, it's not at the top of the list. So from a public opinion point of view, I think there's a bit more wiggle room for Prime Minister Carney. But to your question, Vashi, on caucus management, I think what this comes down to is a fundamental difference in disagreement between how to reach those targets. And I might question former Minister Guilbeault's language around this is impossible to reach the targets. To me, what this speaks to is that Prime Minister Carney has a belief that we should not be using regulations and prohibitions to hit our climate targets, and rather we should unlock market mechanisms like the industrial carbon price to get there. And honestly, that's a conversation that I want to see being had within caucus. I would love to see the Conservatives join that conversation, but I don't think that will ever play out. But to have that in Canada to debate this type of question, I think is key, and it will only drive us forwards in how we reach those targets. And maybe we'll have to be more realistic about the targets, understanding that we are facing U.S. tariffs that are trying to destroy our economy. That's something we need to consider. But in my understanding of how caucus is seeing this, sure, there's some frustration, but there's also an understanding of the realities that we're facing. And I don't think there's a doubt that Prime Minister Carney cares about climate and has a clear vision of how to make Canada a leader in the low-carbon economy.
I was going to say, I think your framing of the differences in the approach, regulation versus prohibition, that kind of thing is bang on. Mr. Guilbeault said on the program, Sebastian, that the carbon price the industrial carbon price would have to be $400. So I eagerly await the Conservatives' reaction to when it gets to that level.
Yeah, I mean, good for Mr. Guilbeault for making the decision he made. I think Prime Minister Carney, frankly, has a bit more to worry about in his BC caucus. There's seemingly a half dozen or more of Liberal MPs in the Lower Mainland and across BC who form a big part of Prime Minister Carney's caucus, who have very vocally come out against this MOU. We have Tlaib Noor Mohammed. We have the MP for Victoria, who has been waxing poetic in Twitter videos about how there really won't be any changes and there will never be a pipeline. And so with Mr. Guilbeault gone, I think Prime Minister Carney needs to turn his attention to those folks. I'd also point out who has Mr. Carney replaced Mr. Guilbeault with? He's brought back the gang. He's brought back another friend of Prime Minister Trudeau, in fact, one of his groomsmen, the architects behind...
Doesn't that have something to do with caucus management?
Well, I mean,
concern?
Well, perhaps Prime Minister Carney should be concerned with the effects that will have on Canada. This is a person who has been the architect of a disastrous immigration policy. And I think what we're seeing is more of the same. I think Canadians can see that they're getting just another repeat with the same cast of characters who are going to continue to deepen Canada's problems.
Okay, on that sunny note, we'll conclude tonight's conversation. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Our front bench, Kevin Deagle, Sharon Carr, Jamie Ellerton, and Sebastian Skamsky. Our takeaway is next after a short break.
How is it the Prime Minister could have been so incompetent to saddle Canadians who can't afford to pay their bills with a $400 million bailout bill without any guarantee of jobs staying in Canada?
I quote the CEO of Algoma Steel that there would be an even darker day if this government hadn't acted. That loan, that support gives Algoma a bridge to the future.
As long as the CEO is happy with the $400 million gift he got from the Prime Minister, that's all that matters to these Liberals. He didn't give the workers a bridge to the future, he gave them a bridge to the unemployment lines.
May I quote a Conservative leader that's actually in office? The Premier of Ontario. We had a choice. Save 2/3 of the jobs or let the company go down. We chose the future.
Welcome back to Power Play and our takeaway, a double-barreled one today. The first on what you just heard, the debate in the House of Commons following, in part at least, the interview we had last night with Algoma CEO Michael Garcia, who conceded that the government, before loaning the company $400 million and the Ontario government $100 million, was aware of its business plan, which did entail this retooling of its plant, which involved 1,000 layoffs, 1,000 people, of course, on Monday getting those layoff notices in Sault Ste. Marie, about a third of the workforce there. The government has today not fought back against that framing at all. And basically, if I were to encapsulate their argument, saving 2/3 of the company was better than letting the whole thing go. So we'll keep our eye on any developments there. And then, of course, we spoke one-on-one with Steven Guilbeault, former Environment Minister turned Minister of Culture and National Identity, who last week, following the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the federal government and Alberta, quit cabinet over the details of what is in there. Tonight on this program, our takeaway from our interview with him is that he contends, based on what the federal government is doing on climate policy, meeting targets in 2030 are impossible.
I think that my government needs to be honest with Canadians. With the rollbacks that we've seen over the past few months on different climate change measures that have been adopted over the years by me and some of my predecessors, it is impossible to see how we achieve our 2030 targets.
In our interview with Steven Guilbeault, he went a step further, essentially saying that the 2050 target of reaching net zero is also in jeopardy should something drastic not change. He also spoke about the number of policies that have been rolled back and the thesis from the government that a strengthened industrial carbon price, in conjunction with a few other things, can displace or mitigate the impact of that rollback. He contends that the price would have to be in the neighborhood of about $400 a ton in order to accomplish that. The MOU with Alberta stipulates that negotiations between Alberta and the federal government to conclude on April 1st of next year would set a floor of $130, though in our interview with Premier Danielle Smith last week, she was hesitant to say that for sure they would arrive at anything if another bitumen pipeline didn't go ahead. So there is a whole lot to unpack about what's to come, but Minister Guilbeault remains out of cabinet. He says he has no regrets about, Mr. Guilbeault, I should say, has no regrets about leaving cabinet and says he'll decide his future in the coming months, but remains in Liberal caucus. I'm Vashi Kapelos. Thanks for watching Power Play tonight. Have a great night.